Brooks, welcome.
What's going on, guys?
Hey, Brooks. Well, before we talk football, let's talk about you a little bit. You're a Houston native. You covered the Houston Texans the last couple of years. In fact, right up until mid-October. You've been on the Eagles beat for The Athletic less than a month. I believe it was exactly 1 month today that you wrote your last column for the Houston Chronicle, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
Have you officially moved to the Philly area, and how are you making out so far here on the East Coast?
Yeah. I am right now in Philly, living in a house with some hosts who are Philly locals. So without them, I'd be lost. But
Yeah.
I'm starting to really love it around here. Grew up in Houston, was born and raised in Texas. I've lived in 7 cities in the last 10 years. That's how this business goes. So covered the Texans for 3 years, covered LSU for 3 years before that, and a hodgepodge of other things before then. But when I got to Philly, I wanted to join the Athletic and be a part of this organization to the point where this was a great opportunity. I picked this sight unseen. I'd never been to Philly before, so
Wow.
I thought I was going to play it cool when I got here, but within 2 days, I'd already eaten a cheesesteak and run the rocket steps. So
You're official then.
But yeah, it's a great city. I was just going around looking at some of the markets I like. I was seeing a lot of music venues actually around here over the time in between. There was that 10-day period where the Eagles didn't have any availabilities, and I've been looking for spots to live long term and things like that. But places like Johnny Brenda's and World Cafe Live, it's a great city, and got a great intro into the football team. The Dallas Cowboys was my first game. Whenever they went back and forth there, had a real scare towards the end, and I got to see how the Eagles so far at 8-1 have kind of lived on the edge throughout this season, and they are the best team in the NFL right now, and they got a break going into the Chiefs game on Monday, and Chiefs haven't lost on Monday night in Kansas City since 2004, but records were meant to be broken, and we'll see if the Eagles can get it done.
How did you like your first venture into Lincoln Financial Field, and you happened to get a Cowboys game? It doesn't get much better than that.
Man, when I got in, I wanted to just find the local radio stations, and I clicked it on and rotated through, and the first thing I heard was a caller being like, "The Cowboys suck," and then playing like a song. I don't know if there's an actual song, but it was like, "Cowboys suck," and then I wanted to walk around the tailgate, so I got there early, and my hosts were out there, and they knew some folks that had one, and just walked around. I was like, man. So the Texans in the last 3 years haven't been great, and Houston loves its football. Don't get me wrong, but whenever they start losing, there was some protective dormancy going on. And walking around that tailgate, seeing people come into the stadium, the way they acted throughout the entire game, it felt, I've covered college football before, and it felt like there was certainly a presence there throughout the night, and so yeah, it was an experience for sure.
So the Eagles are 8-1, as you mentioned, but I think they only have 1 or 2 double-digit wins. As you said, they've kind of been skating by with a lot of close games. And there are concerns. People always seem to focus on the negative, unfortunately. But one of the concerns for a lot of people is the secondary. Lots of different faces from week to week. It's probably been the weakest unit on the team. The Eagles are in the bottom 5 in the league in both opponents' quarterback rating and passing yards per team allowed. Are they going to improve that going forward now with Bradley Roby, we think, coming back, Keith Byard continuing to fit in? What's your view of the secondary?
Yeah, I think it's a system that they've been working through a lot of injuries for sure, and I've been looking at Sean Desai a little more closely this week going into the Chiefs, and that when losing Avonte Maddox was big for the secondary and trying to rotate that through Eli Ricks, and it wasn't working in a lot of ways, and one of the biggest mysteries when I was first studying this team and trying to catch up was they had such a good pass rush. They're getting to the quarterback, both hitting him and sacking him, and all the things that you would expect a secondary to have. It's interceptions. It's time to cover receivers and not give up so much yards per attempt. But I think having Bradley Roby in there, those 2 games that he played, there was some improvement there. That having a veteran, he's going to be able to have extra communication throughout the secondary. I think also getting Justin Evans back, he's kickstarted his 20-day window in practice after starting 4 games earlier this year, having options with him and Byard, who, it's not just who plays in the slot, but also how do you game plan to, stretch and mix your coverages too. With a guy like CeeDee Lamb last game, where they can put him inside, outside, try and find open holes for them. And it's not just the secondary either. The linebacker core has struggled in pass coverage. Out of all the NFL teams, there's a site that I've been using, True Media, that has a lot of deep analytics, and no, only 2 other teams get targeted more where those zones where the linebackers are than the Eagles. And we've seen, Zach Cunningham work there, and Nicholas Morrow there. Obviously now Nakobe Dean out, but no one's really been solid in pass coverage in that space. And I think those are spots that the Chiefs can exploit too. So, long answer to your question, but I don't know if there is an answer yet that really says, hey, this team is going to get better significantly in this sector until we've seen it. So we'll see what happens once Roby got in. That's why they picked him up. And I am interested to see how Justin Evans factors into the mix now that they've made the Byard trade.
Well, over on the offensive side of the ball, I don't know about how much of this you've heard from a distance, but a lot of fans on Brian Johnson right out of the chute, and at Jalen Hurts not playing near as well as he has in the past. But here we are at midseason. We're 8-1, leading in the statistical offensive categories are better than they were last year and the year before. But a lot of heat coming to those guys. I don't know how much better they can be than what we've seen.
When I was looking at Super Bowl contenders, I wanted to see metrics in terms of who and what is successful to win a Super Bowl. And last year, obviously, the defense was the best part of that team going into the playoffs. And then the Super Bowl, not being able to get to Mahomes in the backfield after leading the NFL in sacks. One of the things is, in terms of EPA, which is an advanced metric that basically is what's the likelihood of a team to score on any given play. If a team didn't have a top 10 defense, they needed to have a top 4 offense. And the Eagles right now have that. It's yes, I know Jalen Hurts has had some turnover issues throughout this year, interceptions, some fumbles in key situations in games that they still managed to win, and a lot due to some of the defensive effort there too. But their offense is productive. It is efficient, a lot largely to what these wide receivers are doing. A.J. Brown's having a hell of a year, and it's interesting that he's not in the MVP hunt. It's typically a quarterback-oriented award, and Hurts is right now neck and neck with Mahomes in terms of the odds makers. So I think now that Hurts, we've wondered about his knee the last couple of weeks, he's managed to work through that. He said selfishly that the bye week couldn't have come at a better time. We'll see how much he factors more into the run game, whether that expands now that Dallas Goedert is out. But this offense has largely been efficient, and I think when we hear Nick Sirianni talk about the run game and the last 5 weeks and how it's gone down into the lower 30s in terms of yards per carry, 30th amongst NFL teams. It'll be interesting to see once Cam Jurgens works his way back in, whether that really is as simple as getting movement along the interior. But even with all of those things that have happened, there's still a top 4 offense in terms of EPA, which I know doesn't, translate a lot easy to what you see on the field. But in terms of teams that won the Super Bowl the last 10 years, the Eagles have the offense necessary to do that.
Hey, you mentioned Cam Jurgens. I didn't hear any update. Is he due back this week, or how soon, or what do you know about Cam Jurgens?
Yeah, the last time Sirianni talked was 2 Mondays ago. We'll talk to again on Thursday, just from what the conversation has been lately. Saw him go in practicing towards the end of that week. There were questions whether he would be ready even as soon as the Cowboys, but was a scratch for that game. It normally, as I've covered teams and people who make that 21-day window, you're not just going to kickstart that thinking, oh, this guy's not going to be ready within 3 weeks. So you could keep someone on the injured reserve and activate them and kickstart their practice. So, it would make sense along that timeline for him to get back into the mix and possibly be ready against the Chiefs. Sirianni said that they need Cam Jurgens, they need the all depth in the offensive line.
Yeah.
So just taking terms of how they talk about this and how I've seen this work out before, they wouldn't open that window, and it would be surprising to me if he wasn't in the mix to play.
Good.
Well, Brooks, I have to ask you, there's a whole lot of love for the San Francisco 49ers. I'm not finding that love that much. And with Dallas, the Eagles don't seem to be getting the love from the national media and the odds makers for that matter. What is it that everybody sees in San Francisco that maybe I'm not seeing?
I think San Francisco has had a lot of good games against some top competition. I think the Cowboys game sticks out for sure. There was a time where Brock Purdy wasn't playing as well. Now he's recovered. It is a quarterback oriented kind of situation, and now that they're back on track, I think that's why people like them. They like their defense. I mean, when you look at that, the Eagles talk about this all the time, right? If they ever have a spare draft pick or want to be able to sign somebody, they usually go towards the middle. And nobody in the NFL has really stacked up their defensive line other than the Eagles quite like that than the 49ers. So when you think about a team that can continually make a push into the playoffs, where's their depth in those key spots? And the 49ers have that. I covered the Texans, obviously, and D'Amico Ryan's coming over, and I saw their system work. And you look at how the Texans have had a revival in the last 3 weeks, and just the talent that they have, how it was maximized last year. I think it's not hard to believe that the 49ers, if they didn't lose all their quarterbacks towards the end of the postseason, they might have been Super Bowl champions last year. So there's a large part of that talent that's remaining. They get Deebo Samuel back. I think they're a challenger for sure, and a lot like the Eagles in the sense where you're like, hey, what happens once they're healthy? I think we're starting to see that football being played from the out west.
So Monday night, what do you expect from this Eagles-Chiefs Super Bowl matchup? It's going to be a good one, I think.
Oh yeah, I think it's going to be a close one. I like to see how the Eagles handle a very different Chiefs offense in some ways. They don't have the depth at receiver that they did last year, and maybe that helps out a little bit with the secondary issues. But again, having Travis Kelce in the mix, where they've struggled in that middle zone in terms of defense, I think the Chiefs are going to get their yards. I think they're going to get their touchdowns. I think we're going to have to see whether this run game for the Eagles can play an influence in time of possession, where they can control the clock in key situations. The last 4 minutes against the Cowboys, they went stagnant through 3 drives. It's going to be another one of those games that tests whether this team really is a Super Bowl contender, can win these games. I think it's a very tough place to win, and I think the Chiefs coming off a bye themselves, I think it's a toss-up at this point. So I'm really expecting all those things to be tested. I don't know which way it's going to go. So, but coming out of that, the Eagles will have a better understanding of whether those questions that they had entering this game really are problems, or if there's ones they're going to be able to manage in the long run.
What do you think of the schedule that they've had? And they can't win them all. I think we all know they can't win them all, but we've been through Miami, been through Dallas, we have Kansas City, we got San Francisco in there. We got, there you go, the Bills, who are struggling a little bit, Cowboys again, Seahawks. Realistically, how many of these games can you win?
Let's say they go 3-2 in the next 5 games. They'd still, in my opinion, finish with 3 losses on the year, because you finish out with the Giants, Cardinals, and Giants again, and those teams have not been playing very well. So you end up being the number 1 seed again. So it's pretty favorable for them in this situation. And Bills right now, it's when a team's fighting for its life in a lot of ways. I think that's also an interesting game to me, because also I covered LSU. So at the time in 2019, their surge in offense was a large part to how Joe Brady, who was the passing game coordinator at the time, but had a big influence on Joe Burrow's surge into the Heisman and the national championship that year. He's now the interim offensive coordinator for the Bills that need things to happen. So, look, I think the 49ers game is going to be certainly interesting. The Bills game could be a little bit more tricky than you'd expect with a team that might have some tendency changes just because they need them, and they've had talent. But I don't think they go with a losing record over those 5 weeks. And again, you end with Giants, Cardinals, Giants, and I don't think anybody would pick the Eagles to lose any of those games unless they're benching a significant amount of players. So starting 8-1, that's what's great about that. You can end up having the number 1 seed and having a close to 500 finish.
Brooks, I have to ask this, but forgive me. How many times will Taylor Swift's name get mentioned Monday night? We hear that her parents and the Kelsey parents are going to be there in Kansas City. I imagine we're going to see them on screen at least, 7 or 8 times?
I think that might actually be a conservative estimate.
Yeah.
That's per quarter.
And the thing is, too, whenever I got this job, if I had a nickel for any friend of mine that was a girl or was not really that interested in terms of football or whatever, they're all like, hey, so go talk to Jason Kelsey, and then they're going to play the Chiefs. Like, seriously, I'm like, all right, well, at least there's a contingent of friends that are now interested in what I do. So, you got to take that for what it is.
That's funny. Well, hey, Brooks, we're about run out of time. Let everybody know where they can find what you've got going on, your social medias, all the stuff with the Eagles that you're working now.
Yeah. You can find me on Twitter at BKUBENA and on theathletic.com. You can find all my work there. We're going to have some stuff ramping up here leading up to Monday Night Football. So it's been a little quiet. I've tried to get some stuff out there the last couple of weeks just to produce some work and some of the things that I'd been thinking about before, but you can find out all there. I'm really excited about some of the in-depth stuff that I've got working on some research. So you can find all that stuff there at theathletic.com.